I'm going to be talking about this issue right now, which I'm going to do a better video on this because I just discovered this guy. Um, I'm going to have to do a lot of research into what he's talking about because normally I don't tune in to African American people that speak about Egypt, any type of like infatuation with Egypt. Um, I just want to say that, I have a Cameroonian friend who I've been knowing her for like the past 5 years. I have a couple Nigerian friends. There's a lot of Africans here in Texas. There's a lot of Africans here. And I'm going to be doing some research on this guy and some research on what he's saying because I just feel that he really needs to be corrected. I do. I have a strong feeling that he needs to be corrected. I'm actually taking a trip to Cameroon in 2024, and I will be filming while I'm there. I'm also going to try to go over to Egypt while I'm there just to visit the museums. I think that this infatuation with not Europe, I guess because European Union and flying to France from Nigeria just to be able to go into Egypt and all this stuff. But I'm going to get back to that. I think this infatuation with Egypt amongst African Americans started back in the 1980s when Nigerians came over here to this country. Well, they were already over here since the late 50s, early 60s. But they came over here with the dashikis in the late 60s, early 70s. They started selling dashikis over here. And I'm going to have to find exactly, I'm going to have to get the history of dashikis in America. Because all this infatuation with Egypt, I'm going to explain how it stems from that. So in the late 60s and early 70s, because Jimi Hendrix used to wear the dashikis too, and that's one of the black celebrities that kind of got black people, the black public in America, to start buying these dashikis. Black people in America started, purchasing these dashikis, and it started from there. And black people in America had already been socialized and brainwashed to think that, lighter skin tone is better. So black people in America, because this is why I don't fuck with like trying to, I usually don't argue with people online. I usually don't try to argue with anyone because one thing about it, this is a very whitewashed country. America is. A lot of things that go on here as far as the society and the social structure. Being in Canada, back in 2017 really has taught me that there's a lot of just distorting social culture in America that stems all the way back to slavery. This stems back to the 50s and 60s. And I'm wanting to put that explanation out there. And I'm wanting to put the examples out there about the reason why so many black people today are talking about this whole Egyptian stuff. And this shit been going on since the 80s. African Americans, for whatever reason, they're very obsessed with Egyptian people. And let me stop myself. I know the reason. The reason is colorism. It goes over into colorism. It goes over into these spells of stupefaction as it pertains to America and stupefying the American people. Most African American people who are not biracial, because most biracial people in America are mixed with black and white, some sort of white from either the East Coast or the West Coast or down south, and African American. And let me stop saying African American because actually black Americans is what I want to say. Black Americans. And a lot of people who are in America who are biracial, a lot of them don't have any African in them. The majority of them. But like I said, black people in America who they're black in America, their mama was born black in America, their grandmother was born black in America, their great-grandmother was born black in America. This is a cultural thing that I'm trying to excavate here in this conversation that I'm trying to have regarding this. Colorism is very real in the black community. For those of you who have my Instagram, you saw my ex-husband. He's clearly not a black man. You guys have saw my current little boo that I've been with for the past 2 years. He's clearly not a black man. Colorism is very high in the black community. You know, I don't know how many of you follow Bree Runway, but she's a chocolate pop star from the UK. Colorism is very much specific to America. And so this ties into colorism, this idea, this, you know, controlled idea that black people have regarding Egypt. These ideas that they have in their head about Egypt. Like I said, it started with, you know, African people coming over here in the late 60s and early 70s selling these dashikis. Well, black people took it one step further. They want to point out the nicer looking black people in Africa, you know, as it pertains to what their eyes have been trained and what their mind has been trained to call beautiful, which is the more lighter skin tone people, the more mixed people. And it is very much wrapped. It's all wrapped up in colorism. It really is. It started there in the late 60s, early 70s with the dashikis. All of a sudden, black people all of a sudden started wanting to learn about African culture as it pertains to people that have a look that is more appealing to the American eye, i.e. Egyptian people, Ethiopian people. Black people have never been interested in Cameroon. They've never been interested in Togo. They've never been interested in East Sudan, South Sudan. They've never been interested in Nigeria like that. Until Nigerians, I think, for the past 20 years have really bucked up on the African American to let them know, you got that slave mind and you think I'm ugly because I'm dark or I'm brown skinned, but fuck you. They really have a fuck you attitude towards African Americans. They really do. Because they see the colorism. You know, when they start speaking that French, a lot of them know French. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, French is the second language in Nigeria. French is the second language. And when they start speaking in those languages that they know, they start talking about what they see in America, what they hear, and what they have learned from the culture. And one of the things that every African I've ever known, my friend Wendy, my friend Asuka, and my friend Molly, who she's for some reason her mom named her after Molly the country, but they all say the same thing, that, you know, America has a lot of colorism. America has a lot of little things in the culture that matters that should not matter. Like, and they kind of decide, those little things kind of decide what part you're going to get dealt in the culture, especially if you choose to be with black people. And that's completely true. You know, it warmed my soul to hear that some Africans really see through these African Americans. They really see them for what they are and see them for how they are. You know, and one thing I will say is that this idea about, you know, Egyptians, it is an idea that is really kind of designed to, you know, brew capitalism. You know, it's designed to brew capitalism too, because even Michael Jackson, he capitalized off that Egyptian shit. He did a whole video, you know, had Eddie Murphy and Amon in the video doing that Egyptian shit. That Remember the Time video. We all know that video. But when that video was done, he wasn't talking about those people. He wasn't talking about nothing regarding no Egyptian people. And Michael Jackson in his lifetime, he traveled over to Africa, I believe a total of 17 times, 16, 17 times. He traveled over to Africa 16 or 17 times. I'm going to have to pull up the facts about that, because he went off to Africa a few times in his lifetime. He traveled there about 16 or 17 times. He had been to Nigeria in his lifetime about 5 times, Michael Jackson. So the fact that we have so many African American people, they look stupid to these African folks. I truly believe, and I truly am going to stick with the idea of, if you're talking about Egypt, and you're talking about Egyptian things, and you're talking about these people and their culture, there are two things that you should know about those people and their culture. Since you can go all the way back to the first dynasty and start talking about how Egyptians originally looked, since you can do that, I want you, African American people who sit around talking about the Egypt, because I haven't seen Wakanda. I don't want to see it. I haven't seen none of the Wakanda movie, the Black Panther movies. I don't want to see it. I haven't seen it. I refuse to accept that African stupefaction, that ignorance. I refuse to accept that. I saw a snippet, and I love Beyonce. I saw a snippet of one of Beyonce's videos from not the Renaissance album, but the album before that. I've listened to the music. I don't watch none of her videos. I refuse to accept Black Americans' stupefied ideas and ideology of Africa. And that's all they know is the word. I think that 90% of African Americans or Black Americans, all they know is the word Africa. They don't know nothing about Cameroon. They don't know nothing about Togo. They don't know nothing about Mali. And these are countries I'm naming. They don't know anything about East Sudan, South Sudan, Benin. They don't know anything about the Ivory Coast. They don't know anything about Ghana. They don't know anything about Senegal. They don't know anything about any of these African countries I just named. They might know Nigeria, but they all know Egypt. Oh, Egypt this, Egypt that, Egypt this, Egypt that, Egyptians and kings and queens. Da, da, da. You look stupid and you look ignorant. And before you all I gotta say to African Americans who are on that stupid shit, before you start talking about Egyptians, a race of people that tried to cool the earth of Nigerians back in the third dynasty, before the country became Nigeria, yeah, look it up, nigga, and look up the word cool. C-U-L-L. Look it up. So before you want to sit up and talk about Egypt, which is a country and a continent that you don't care no shit about, how about if you learn the history of what's happened to Black Americans in America? Because all you seem to want to talk about is slavery and maybe a few inventors. You want to talk about Madam C.J. Walker, the dude that invented peanut butter, or Harriet Tubman. You don't seem to know the full history of African Americans in America, but you think you know something about Egypt when you don't know shit about Africa, period. And you traveled to Egypt twice, so all of a sudden you know everything about Egypt because you've been there twice. Shut the fuck up. African people think African Americans are ignorant. They think they are dumb, and they think they are stupid. And I don't fucking blame them. Because what race of people is sitting around not looking nothing like the people that they praise and worship? Learn about the history of Cameroon, motherfucker. Learn about the history of Nigeria. Learn about the history of Togo and Togolese people. Learn about the history of East Sudan. Learn about the history of Benin. Learn about the history of Ghana. Because guess what, motherfucker? As much as you want to stick those people's utensils up your ass, them Egyptian people, you don't look like them. And they don't look like you. Egyptian people have not been dark-skinned with 4C hair since the first dynasty. They thought better of themselves. And they went and mixed themselves with the people from the Arabian Peninsula. In other words, right next door. And some of them mixed themselves with the Italonites over in Italia. And the Sicilians, the original Sicilians. The original people from Damascus. Some of them were mixing with those people too. You know nothing of Egypt because you done bought some shit off Esty. You don't even look Egyptian at all. And if you go to a museum, they're taught to tell you that you look like you're originally Egyptian. They're taught to tell you that you look like an Egyptian. Yeah, an Egyptian back from the first dynasty because they wanted to wash out the black from their skin. That's what they wanted to do. So if you look like me, or you look a little bit lighter than me, and your hair is like mine, and you know that your mom and dad are black people, and you know your grandma and your grandpa on both sides are just black folks, you need to accept that you're black. And stop trying to tell girls like me that I'm a self-hater because I date a white man. I date a white man because there's so much colorism in the black community. Black men are not really interested in marrying black women nowadays. And we all know this. We all freaking know this, homie. Stop. But this stupidity in the African American community of talking about these Egyptian people and not really knowing the African history of them, this shit is stupid. And somebody's got to talk about the stupidity of this shit. This shit's stupid. I'm actually going to try to bring one of my friends on, one of my African friends on my channel once I get my setup. I just moved and I got to get my setup and everything because I really want one of my African friends to do a whole podcast with me about what they think about how African American people worship these Egyptian people. And if you think about it, it's kind of natural that African American people will worship those Egyptian people, because who knew that down in Louisiana, African American people pretty much worship those Creole people. They worship those Creole fuckers. Them Creole fuckers wouldn't show you nothing about how to get no property or how to own no land. But they was out here owning land and they was out here owning property. They just let your black ass rent it because the whites didn't want to rent it. They didn't want you renting it after slavery was abolished. You talking all that talk about Egyptians, and I bet your black ass didn't know that. You so concerned with some faraway group that y'all trying to make a fucking god out of that you don't know that. I'm going to have to tackle this issue in the black community because it's an issue. You don't even look like the Egyptians from the 2nd through 12th dynasty. And you want to talk about these people and have these different pieces of architect in your house that they had, these symbols that they had. And these pieces, these house pieces and decor from their era that they had. When at one time, those people were trying to cool the earth of West Africans because they didn't look the way they wanted them to look. And because they wouldn't travel all the way over to the Arabian Peninsula and travel over into parts of Italia to mix with those people. These African American folks is on this internet that's in these spaces talking about these Egyptians. They don't know shit of what they talking about. One thing I will say about white folks, since if me and my ex-husband go live right now, how can she talk about what she think about Egyptians and African American? She got a white man. She ain't got no voice. She got a white man. She shouldn't be allowed to talk. Let me tell you something about white people and these Greeks and these Roman motherfuckers that they are so fucking obsessed with. Just like your ass obsessed with them Egyptians, we all know that white people who ain't got chopsticks stuck in their mouth from some Asian ass, the white folks who ain't on that, they normally are obsessed with these Greeks and these Romans. But guess what? I know an MIT professor that stays out on the outskirts of Boston that got a Peugeot in his house right now, and he can tell you what the name of the soldier was who carried that Peugeot back during the Roman Empire. Can you get something off Etsy that's supposed to be Egyptian? And can you tell me exactly who had that in their temple back in the day? I bet you can't now, can you? I bet you can't. These black people out here that's talking about these Egyptians, I'm just going to say, in my opinion, there's nothing but capitalism in that. It's a pro-black edge is all it is. It's a pro-black edge. It really is. It's just a pro-black edge. That's all it is. It's just a pro-black edge. And that's all it will ever be. And these pro-black people, one thing I got in common with Tommy Sotomayor is I don't trust any of them. They some black ballers and some bald-faced liars. And I don't trust any of them. We're going to get back to this Egyptian shit And these black Americans who run around talking about Egypt and Egyptians and all this Egyptian so-called culture. But because here's the thing, if you don't know about the history of a country's trade, you don't know about the history of their wars, why are you talking about them? And one thing these white ass motherfuckers be knowing about Greece and the Roman Empire, they do be knowing the history of those people's trade and the history of their wars. Hell, we made white folks done made a whole series is about Spartacus. That was about the Third Servian War. That's a war right there. That was a war. But you can't tell me nothing about the wars that happened in Egypt or around Egypt or because of Egypt. You can't tell me nothing about the trade or nothing like that. But you talking about all this king and queen and dynasty shit. You sound stupid. And if you want to fluff up your stupefaction with some valid points and a little bit of education of how things were, do your thing. But you shouldn't give a fuck about those people's culture if you don't know nothing about their trade or their wars. The history of their trade and the history of their wars. Period.